My sister shaved my head to embarrass me in front of the courtroom, convinced she'd already won. But then my fiancé entered and stepped up to the judge's bench, her face drained of all color, and the entire courtroom went dead silent. Okay, I'm Kane, and honestly, it's a shock I'm even able to share this. My own sister once pinned me down in a courthouse bathroom, literally shaving my head. She called it discipline, an act of control. The truth? She was trying to break me down before I could even find my footing. What she didn't realize was that the man she brushed off as a nobody, the man I love, was about to enter, wearing the very judicial robe she believed was her destiny. And when he took his seat on that bench, she was completely unprepared for the words he was about to read. But before we get to that gavel drop, I'm curious, where are you tuning in from, and what's the time on your side of the world? Drop it in the comments. The Charleston air was thick, smelling of old stone and dampness, the city shrouded in morning mist. The sharp click of my heels on the courthouse steps seemed to echo louder than my own racing heart. I clutched my leather portfolio, the same one I'd held onto for dear life years ago during my dissertation defense. Back then, I felt ready. Today, I was anything but. This wasn't supposed to be my fight. I was just meant to be there, a quiet presence of support. At least, that's the story I told myself. Inside, the cold lights gleamed on the polished marble floor. The security guard barely gave me a second look, but others weren't so subtle. Their eyes followed me, filled with that unspoken question. Why is she even here? It was never outright, just these quick, piercing stares from faces that once meant family. I spotted them across the wide atrium. My mother stood rigidly, her arms crossed like she was bracing for a collision. And Celine, my older sister, sat with her usual effortless poise in an ivory blazer, legs crossed, a smirk playing on her lips that screamed she'd already won a game I didn't even know we were playing. I walked towards the registration desk. A woman there waved me over, her tone polite but noticeably cool. Name? She asked. Kaylin Monroe, I managed, offering a faint smile. She ran her finger down a list, frowned slightly, then handed me a badge. I clipped it to my blazer without looking down, but then a shiver ran up my spine. Printed in bold black letters, K Nobody. I blinked, whispering, this can't be right. It's Monroe, Kaylin Monroe. The woman didn't even bother to look up. That's what the list says, ma'am. If you want to talk to someone, you'll have to wait, but you can't go into the courtroom without a badge. The words stung more than they should have, though a part of me wasn't entirely surprised. Across the atrium, Celine was watching. She slowly, deliberately raised her phone, and I saw the faint flash. She'd captured my badge on her screen. She tilted her head, grinning like a kid who'd just pulled a prank and was waiting for the applause. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I just nodded and turned away. If this was her little game, I wouldn't play my part. I adjusted the badge, pressing it flat against my chest, trying to appear proud, but my hand lingered, pushing hard enough for the plastic edges to dig into my palm. It felt like they had etched their opinion of me right there, that I was insignificant, that I didn't belong. Maybe they believed it. Maybe they needed me to believe it too. The hallway leading to the courtroom was eerily quiet. Each step felt heavier, like my shoes were sticking to the floor. My mother subtly shifted away as I walked past. The message was unmistakable. This wasn't just a court case, it was a declaration. The badge was a public announcement, delivered with Celine's typical dramatic flair. I found a seat on the far side, a safe distance from the family section. As I sat, I glanced down again. K Nobody. Not an error, but a deliberate choice. Had I always been the unseen member of this family? The quiet one? Always trying too hard to please? The one who avoided confrontation, mistaking silence for strength? Perhaps they saw it as weakness. I gripped the badge again, letting the edges bite into my skin, a sharp reminder. Across the aisle, Celine leaned toward our mother, whispered something, and then they both laughed behind their hands. They weren't even trying to be discreet anymore. The courtroom doors swung open, and people began to file in. The click of heels, the rustle of papers, the occasional cough of boredom or resentment. I stood to go inside. Celine glided past, her perfume trailing behind her like a taunt. She leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear. Nobody asked you to be here, Kaylin, she whispered. Just so you know. She didn't wait for me to answer, and I offered none. Because in that moment I understood. This wasn't about her custody hearing, it was about mine. The door shut behind me with a soft thud that still seemed to resonate in the room filled with hushed conversations and expectant faces. I picked a seat near the back, close enough to the counsel table to overhear things, but far enough to hopefully blend in, if that was even possible in a place designed for intense scrutiny. The badge felt like a deliberate insult pinned to my blazer. I sat up straight, crossed my legs, and tried to disappear into the anonymity of the chair. The judge hadn't arrived yet. My name wasn't officially on any court documents. I was supposedly just there to support a distant cousin's custody battle. That's the story Celine had fed me. Now I seriously doubted that cousin even existed. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly. Celine's attorney got to his feet, smoothing his suit with a theatrical flourish. His voice was calm, carrying a weight of practiced authority. Your Honor, we'd like to start with a brief presentation to establish some necessary context regarding the environment of this case. Context. The word itself felt wrong. I blinked as the screen on the far wall flickered to life, a projector humming softly. A PowerPoint title appeared, and then, there it was. My face. Enormous, blown up to 10 times its size, caught in an unflattering mid-blink, my shoulders slightly slumped, and underneath it, as clear as day, the badge. K. Nobody. Gasps rippled. Through the room. People shifted in their seats. A juror's eyebrows shot up. Someone whispered to the person next to them. Celine's attorney gestured smoothly, like a polished salesman. This image was taken this morning. We felt it was important to show how certain individuals have inserted themselves into these proceedings. Uninvited, unscheduled, and potentially unstable. Unstable. I gripped the bench, my nails digging into the polished wood. I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Sweat trickled down my collarbone under the hot lights. I forced my jaw to remain unclenched. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The lawyer clicked his remote. A second slide appeared. Metadata and timestamps. But something was off. The time code read 7:16 a.m. before the court even opened, before I'd even gotten there. That was impossible. I'd parked my car at 7:52. I remembered checking the time while looking at the court directory. I'd even snapped a photo of the courthouse entrance myself, and it was time-stamped. My throat tightened. My mind raced, piecing it together. They'd faked it. Celine, or someone working for her, had doctored the metadata. She wasn't just trying to humiliate me. She was actively framing me. A quiet question from the judge cut through the tense air. Was Miss Monroe listed as a witness? The attorney's lips curved into a smirk that was anything but accidental. No, Your Honor. She showed up on her own, walked in wearing that badge, took a seat, and... Well, he let his voice trail off, feigning reluctance. Some people just can't be taught boundaries. My eyes found Celine. She wasn't looking at me. She didn't need to. She knew I'd be looking. She simply smoothed her skirt and gazed at the screen, a look of twisted pride on her face. I'd seen this move before, years ago, when I was 16 to be exact. Our parents always threw us joint birthday parties, but that year Celine conveniently forgot to put my name on the invitations. The entire class showed up, thinking it was just for her, and she never bothered to correct them. That night, I sat alone on the backyard swing set, eating cake, pretending it didn't hurt to be invisible. This moment, in this courtroom, was that same sting, only amplified and public. But I wasn't 16 anymore, and I wasn't about to disappear. I closed my eyes for a brief second, not to hold back tears, but to collect myself. The courtroom buzzed around me, but my focus sharpened. Then I saw him. In the far back corner, a man sat quietly, arms folded. No notepad, no laptop. His suit was a bit worn, but neat. His eyes weren't on the lawyer. They were fixed on Celine. Unblinking, unsmiling, watching her like someone who had seen her mask slip many times before. He didn't look like a reporter. He wasn't whispering to anyone. He just observed. And the way he leaned in slightly when Celine spoke. It was as if he wasn't waiting for the story, but for the exact moment she'd stumble. He wasn't taking notes. He just watched Celine as if he already had her completely figured out. Before I could try to place the man in the back, a soft rustle broke the tension. A clerk approached the judge, carrying a sealed envelope. Plain, no markings, no stamps, just crisp and somehow ominous. The judge's furrowed brow indicated this wasn't on the agenda. Your Honor, the clerk said softly. This was just delivered, marked urgent, anonymous sender. The judge opened it slowly, carefully, as if handling something distasteful. Silence fell once more. His eyes scanned the contents, then paused, meeting my gaze for a second that felt unnaturally long before he turned to the court reporter. Please, record this as an addendum to the hearing exhibits, he instructed, tapping the document twice before setting it down with a heavy sigh. Then he looked directly at me. Miss Monroe, he said, his voice measured, not unkind. Are you aware there is a psychological evaluation bearing your name from the Charleston Mental Health Institute, dated November 2012? My pulse faltered. The words caught in my throat. That place. That year. I hadn't spoken about it in over a decade, had barely allowed myself to even think about it. It wasn't therapy, it wasn't healing. It was silence, wrapped in sterile medical forms. The attorney stood again, his lips curved into a smile too controlled to be genuine. Your Honor, we submit this solely to provide full context regarding Miss Monroe's mental stability. This document was uncovered by a concerned party. We believe it speaks volumes. The projector switched to a new page. Clinical stark words, diagnosis, emotional instability, behavioral dysregulation. I didn't recognize the words because they weren't about me. They weren't true. I wasn't unstable. I was 22, locked out of my apartment by my sister during a snowstorm. I was barefoot, sobbing, after she'd thrown the deadbolt and turned off her phone. It was supposed to be a joke. Her friends were laughing from the window. She'll be fine. She always freaks out over nothing. I had collapsed on the steps, half frozen, shaking uncontrollably, until a neighbor found me and called an ambulance. But the next morning, our mother had whispered, "This is what happens when you overreact. People will think you're crazy. You want that?" She drove me herself, quietly, deliberately, to a hospital an hour away. She signed the papers. I was held for 72 hours, and when I returned, no one in the family ever mentioned it again. Not even me. Until now. My heart hammered against my ribs, trying to escape, but my face remained composed. I wouldn't give Celine the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. She sat perfectly still at the table, hands folded, lips pressed together, but the faintest upward twitch at the corner of her mouth betrayed her. This was her grand finale, finally unveiled. This isn't therapy, I thought. It's erasure. That's what they did. They twisted everything I survived into a shameful lie. If you control the story, the truth becomes irrelevant. I glanced at my mother. 2 rows behind Celine, she clutched her handbag as if it were a lifeline. She didn't look at me. She looked down. Of course. The judge asked if I had a response. I stood slowly, clearing my throat. My voice trembled, but it wasn't from fear. That file was created without my consent. I was never diagnosed. I was placed in that hospital by family members trying to avoid embarrassment, not because I was a danger to anyone. The real danger was being locked out in a blizzard simply for existing. A murmur went through the room. The judge didn't react, just nodded for the record to reflect my statement. No judgment, no acknowledgement, just words on paper. Because in a courtroom, facts often take a back seat to what's documented. I sat down. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. The man at the back. He stood up for the first time, walking, with slow, measured steps toward the bailiff. They exchanged a few quiet words. The bailiff looked at the judge's bench and nodded once. The judge's eyes narrowed. He picked up his microphone. "Miss Monroe," he said again, "please remain seated. There's been a new development." Celine's head snapped around. For the first time all day, a flicker of fear crossed her face. The judge's gavel tapped twice, not to end the session, but to pause it. A wave of tension moved through the room, like a heat haze. "We'll take a brief recess," he announced, though no one moved. "Counsel and involved parties, please join me in chambers." Vincent Wexler didn't wait to be asked. He walked with a military precision, his coat perfectly uncreased, his gaze steady. He passed Celine without a glance, but she flinched anyway. I followed the line of suits and the heavy silence down a narrow hallway to the private judicial chambers. The wood here felt older, less polished, as if the truth didn't need fancy surroundings. The judge closed the door behind us. "Mr. Wexler, I take it you're not here for a Charleston vacation." Vincent nodded once and placed a sealed manila envelope on the desk. A faint Department of Justice watermark was visible under the chamber lights. "You'll want to review this before the hearing proceeds," he said evenly. "It pertains directly to the misuse of sealed federal records, specifically Exhibit 14 billion, which was submitted to undermine Miss Kaylin Monroe's credibility." Celine opened her mouth to object, but the judge raised a hand. "Are you alleging Exhibit 14 billion was obtained illegally?" Vincent tapped the envelope. "She used court system login credentials that were not assigned to her. We've been monitoring several flagged queries made under Judge Harmon's staff access credentials over the past 2 months, all connected to this hearing, all connected to Miss Celine Monroe." I didn't say a word. I barely breathed. I watched Celine's expression harden like clay in a kiln. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You can't just barge in here with these vague accusations." "I'm not here to accuse," Vincent cut her off. "I'm here to confirm what we've documented. You accessed mental health records sealed under HIPAA. That's a federal crime." The room fell completely silent. Vincent turned slightly toward me, his gaze unwavering. "We've been investigating a pattern of ethical violations tied to Miss Monroe's legal activities. This custody hearing gave us probable cause to widen our investigation." Celine looked at the judge as if she couldn't believe her ears. "You can't take his word over mine. I've worked in this system for years." "That's precisely why this is so serious," the judge stated flatly. "You knew the rules." Celine's attorney, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. "We'll need time to review any evidence." Vincent was already opening the packet. The top page listed Celine's name, time-stamped login credentials, and a list of accessed files, including mine. This isn't a gray area, Vincent said. It's black and white law. Miss Monroe's behavior shows a pattern of manipulation, including falsifying metadata and using sealed documents for personal gain. And then he said the line that hit me harder than anything. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. I'm not here to defend you, Miss Monroe, he told me. I'm here to expose her. Something shifted inside me then. Not relief, not victory, but a deep, quiet understanding. For years, I doubted myself, wondered if I was overreacting, if I'd made things bigger than they were. But here it was, paper, dates, hard facts. Still, Celine wasn't done. She turned to me slowly, her voice low and sharp. You think I'm scared of you? I built this courtroom. You're just a minor character I allowed to linger too long. My hands clenched, but not with fear. I stepped closer, my voice soft but firm. Then it's time to tear it down. The hallway felt colder when I stepped out of the judge's chambers, as if the temperature had dropped 10 degrees just for me. My heels echoed on the marble, the click-click rhythm of a woman desperately trying to keep it together. Celine was already there, leaning casually against the wall as if she hadn't just been caught red-handed. Her face was calm, almost amused. She tilted her head as I approached. Cute little performance in there, she said, her voice low and sugary. But you should know, it only takes one signature to have you held for a 72-hour mental health evaluation. Are you sure you want to keep this up? Her words landed softly but stung sharply. Courthouse staff moved around us, deliberately ignoring the scene. No one met my eyes, no one stepped in. That was the nature of her kind of power. It didn't need to shout. It could whisper threats in hallways, dressed in a navy pantsuit and a smirk. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Not yet. My chest tightened, my breath shallow. Celine's smile widened. Didn't think so, she said, brushing past me as if she'd won another round. I walked without thinking until I found myself on the stone steps outside. The sun was out now, harsh and too bright, as if it hadn't gotten the message that everything inside me felt dark. I sat on a bench under a bare tree, just enough shade to hide me, not enough to comfort me. A few pigeons pecked at the edge of the sidewalk. I didn't look at them. I just stared at my hands, still trembling. A memory. Surfaced. Uninvited. I was 22. A sudden, brutal snowstorm. Locked out of our shared apartment because Celine had forgotten I was coming home that weekend. I pounded on the door for 30 minutes before a neighbor finally let me in. That night, I had my first full-blown panic attack. Our mother told me I was being dramatic. A week later, I was in therapy, not to heal, but to be quieted. Celine doesn't lie, my mother had said. She just remembers things better than you. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over Langston's contact. I typed, maybe it's not worth it. I stared at the blinking cursor for what felt like an eternity. You okay, ma'am? I looked up. A young woman stood a few feet away, holding out a bottle of water. Her courthouse badge read Naira. Her brown eyes were cautious but kind. I saw. What happened, she said. That woman, your sister, she treats people like they're disposable, uses them, then tosses them aside. I accepted the water. You work for her? Interned. Not anymore. A pause. Then she added, you haven't let her win yet, so don't. The word struck a chord. I'd said something similar years ago to a freshman whose roommate had deliberately ruined her art project out of pure jealousy. I couldn't recall the girl's name, but I remembered her tears and how she'd smiled when I told her not to concede her victory just because someone louder claimed she'd lost. I stood up. My body still felt shaky, but something inside me had clicked, back into place. Naira watched me. Whatever you're about to do, she said, her tone a mix of joking and hopeful, make it count. I nodded. It won't just count. It'll resonate. I walked to the far end of the courtyard and dialed Langston. He picked up on the first ring. Talk to me. I'm ready to file the motion, I said. Use the full clause. Whistleblower status. No redactions? There was a brief silence, then that familiar determination returned to his voice. It's about time, Monroe, he said, and the line went dead. By the time I stepped back into the courtroom, the atmosphere had changed. The casual chatter was gone. The judge's assistant stood by the double doors, informing reporters and visitors that they had to leave. Closed session only. Legal counsel, essential staff, and involved parties. Langston gave me a subtle nod as I returned to my seat, his calm presence a much-needed anchor. Then, the opposing attorney stood, requesting permission to call an expert witness for a character defense. Context. That word, again, set off alarm bells. The judge adjusted his glasses. Proceed. The doors opened. A tall, lean man with a goatee, and a cold, polished air walked in. "Dr. Adrian Wolfe," the clerk announced. My stomach clenched. The name wasn't completely unknown. Years ago, during the aftermath of my difficult second year at Harvard, his name had been briefly mentioned by my department head. But I had never been his patient. I'd never even spoken to him. Dr. Wolfe took the stand with practiced composure. "I'm a clinical psychiatrist with 22 years of experience," he began. "During the Harvard International Fellowship cycle, I was consulted regarding a fellow named Monroe. There were concerns of erratic behavior, emotional dysregulation, and defiance of institutional norms." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. I froze, unable to breathe. I heard someone, maybe Langston, say, "Objection," but it was drowned out by the sudden noise. The judge rapped his gavel once. "Let him finish. You will have a chance to rebut." Celine sat in the front row, hands folded neatly in her lap, her gaze fixed on me as if she were watching a play whose ending she already knew. "Though no inpatient treatment was formally mandated," Dr. Wolfe continued, "I advised a temporary leave from duties. It is my professional opinion that Miss Monroe's profile reflected patterns of paranoia and displacement." My pulse pounded in my ears. I wanted to stand up, to scream, but I did neither. I waited. I had to. Langston slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside was a scanned letter bearing the signature of Professor Leah Marks, the fellowship director. I unfolded the sheet with trembling fingers. It read, "To whom it may concern, Monroe remained in active and good standing during all fellowship duties. She was never placed under evaluation, nor did she meet with any psychiatric staff. Any statement to the contrary is inaccurate and not reflected in institutional records." The judge asked if I had anything to submit. I stood. "Your Honor, I respectfully request permission to present sealed records from my academic file, including internal grievances and personal statements, on the record, and I would like to be the one who reads them." There was a long pause. The judge looked at me for a moment, then nodded. I opened the folder. My hands were cold. I had memorized every word over the years, but this was the first time I would say them out loud. I, Monroe, filed a confidential harassment complaint against 3 peer fellows on March 17, 2014. No action was taken. Flip. On May 9, 2014, I was treated for a stress-induced ulcer following months of work sabotage. I was told I was overreacting. Flip. Emails between Professor Marks and the grant committee indicate concern about interpersonal targeting, with Kaylin as the documented target. I kept reading. The courtroom was silent. No coughs, no rustling papers, just my voice and the truth. Celine didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. When I reached the final page, I paused. I was told, "You always make things harder than they need to be." That wasn't a diagnosis. That was a warning. I folded the record closed with trembling fingers and looked directly into Celine's eyes. Outside the courtroom, the early autumn breeze rustled the leaves of the live oaks lining Broad Street. I stood at the base of the quay, courthouse steps, breathing in the stillness before the inevitable storm. My breath misted faintly in the cool air, the silence strangely calming. I hadn't slept much in the past week, not since the hearing adjourned, not since I read those words aloud, but for the first time in a long time, I hadn't woken up feeling small. As I entered the courthouse lobby, I caught snippets of whispers, a hushed tension in the air, like an unscripted scene was about to play out. 2 clerks near the security desk were murmuring, their voices barely audible. "Did you hear who's presiding today? I thought Judge Merrill had this docket." "No, Merrill's out sick. A substitution was filed late last night. Monroe's on the bench. Now." I stopped mid-step. Monroe. Not me. Langston. My stomach dropped and flipped at the same time. I walked slowly through the metal detector, my bag clutched tightly against my chest. By the time I stepped into the gallery, all eyes were already facing forward. The court officer stood tall by the door. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Langston E. Monroe presiding." I froze. He entered from a side door, robed, stoic, his expression unreadable. Not a flicker of recognition in his eyes. The same man who once traced constellations on my back. At 2 a.m. was now seated behind the elevated bench, wooden gavel in hand, his judicial calm masking the fire I knew burned within him. Celine, seated 2 rows ahead with her attorney, let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You have got to be kidding me." Her lawyer tugged at her sleeve. "Quiet." She ignored him. "This is a joke, right? Her fiancé gets to decide the case now? What's next? A jury made up of her bridesmaids?" Langston lifted his head slightly. "Miss Monroe, please be advised. I filed my judicial recusal from all familial affiliations effective 3 weeks ago. My assignment today is strictly procedural and was confirmed through the clerk's office." He tapped the file in front of him. "Now, shall we proceed?" Celine shrank back, her lips pursed tight. Her voice had lost its usual confidence. Langston turned to the courtroom assistant. Please enter into Record Exhibit 7C, full audit disclosure of Monroe Family Trust and associated nonprofit activities. The screen behind him lit up. Columns of figures, vendor names, timestamps, wire transfers. I'd seen the paperwork, yes, but hearing it read aloud by someone with the authority to act on it made my skin tingle. Langston's voice was even, but every word was like a scalpel. According to this report, $480,000 was funneled from the Monroe Women's Education Fund through shell vendors, Shellheart Consulting, Reedy Digital, and Astor Foundation, all traced back to Miss Celine Monroe's personal accounts. Celine opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her lawyer pressed a hand to his forehead. Langston continued, his tone firm. These transfers occurred during fiscal years when the trust was inactive, meaning Kaylin Monroe's portion was frozen but used as silent collateral in private debt clearance. I sat still. I didn't interrupt. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. This wasn't about revenge. This was about verification. Langston looked down at the bench, then back at the parties. The court finds substantial cause to pursue a civil breach inquiry under Fiduciary Violation Code 38.4b, effective immediately. This matter is referred to the Department of Justice for investigation. Celine flinched. I watched her eyes dart left, then right, searching for an escape route that wasn't there. Langston didn't look at me once, not even after the ruling. He stood, nodded toward the clerk, and exited the bench as cleanly as he had entered. Only then did I stand, but not to follow him. I turned toward the back of the courtroom and caught my reflection in the tall glass panel near the door. Same dark suit, same posture, but something was different. My face didn't look small anymore. I didn't look like someone waiting to be chosen or protected or proven right. I looked like someone who finally belonged. And not because I fought louder. I didn't win because I yelled. I won because I waited, because I proved my case, and because I refused to disappear. The courtroom was beginning to empty. Shoes clicked against the old marble floors, papers were shuffled into briefcases, and a distant chatter hummed like an engine winding down. I had just reached the tall oak doors, my fingers grazing the cold brass handle, when I heard it. Your Honor, we request an emergency injunction. The words sliced through the room like glass on stone. I turned. Celine's attorney was on his feet, waving a legal motion in the air like a flag of desperation. This entire session is compromised. Conflict of interest. The presiding judge is the romantic partner of the petitioner. We believe bias has tainted. Every ruling. Celine's eyes were wide, not with fright, but with a manic energy. She was smiling again. The same smile she'd worn when she cornered me in the hallway last week. The same one she'd worn the day she forged my name on that grant application. Langston had already stepped down, protocol observed, but he turned back slightly, his mouth set in a hard line. The bailiff retrieved the motion and passed it to the clerk. Within moments, it landed in the hands of Judge Margaret Evelyn Rhodes, retired but pulled in for emergency review. Judge Rhodes has taken emergency oversight, the clerk announced. Please remain seated. I did not speak. Not yet. Celine, almost giddy now, leaned into her attorney's shoulder and whispered something. His chest puffed out. He must have thought they'd finally trapped me. I reached into my bag, the same leather portfolio I'd carried since the first hearing, the same one my father had given me when I graduated. I hadn't opened it publicly until now. I walked back toward the bench, my heels deliberate, my pulse steady. I handed the sealed envelope to the clerk, who passed it along. Your Honor, I said calmly, that document contains an affidavit, notarized. 2 months before my father passed away, I asked that it be entered into the sealed record. Judge Rhodes adjusted her glasses. Do you understand what this entails, Miss Monroe? Once I break this seal, we proceed under sworn admission. There's no taking it back. I understand, I said, and I did. The judge broke the wax seal, her brows lifting ever so slightly as she began reading. She paused once, then twice, and then read aloud. I, Franklin J. Monroe, being of sound mind and clear intent, do hereby declare that the initial concept, funding, and operational proposal for the Monroe Women's Education Fund were the sole creation of Kalina Monroe. I insisted her sister, Celine, be presented as the face of the foundation solely to protect the family's image and to secure traditional donor confidence. I deeply regret this decision. The courtroom didn't erupt, it silently imploded. The words, continued, signed, dated, witnessed, notarized. I took from Kaylin what she built. I let Celine pretend. I told myself it was for the greater good, but I know now it was cowardice. Celine shot up. This is fake. He would have never... Judge Rhodes held up a palm. Sit down, Miss Monroe. Celine's mouth opened, then closed. Her voice, for the first time, had nowhere to go. Judge Rhodes continued. The motion to suspend proceedings on the basis of conflict is denied. The document provided is valid. Furthermore, Based on this affidavit and accompanying financial disclosures, this court rules that Miss Celine Monroe shall be removed from all founding and operational documents of the Monroe Women's Education Fund, effective immediately. She looked up, her voice firm. You may have had the spotlight, Miss Celine, but the light was never yours. Celine sat slowly, her attorney pressing his fingers to his temple, already anticipating the storm of appeals. The clerk walked toward me, with a fresh copy of the revised Articles of Incorporation. My name alone now sat at the top, founder. I took the paper with steady hands and said nothing. There was nothing left to say that the truth hadn't already spoken louder. The sun was beginning to dip outside the courtroom windows, casting long, amber light across the benches. It touched Celine's face, but for once she wasn't basking in it. She looked smaller now, not ruined, but exposed. And me? I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like a woman who had been walking with stones in her pockets for years and had finally set them down. Truth, it turns out, isn't a firework. It's a weight. One that settles so deeply no one else can lift it for you. But once it lands, there's no denying its existence. Power didn't look like shouting. It looked like holding the truth until it was too heavy to ignore. 3 weeks passed. The courthouse had faded into memory, not gone, but quieter now, like the calm after a storm. My name had been cleared, my rights restored, my work legally mine again. But freedom, that was still something I was learning how to carry. That morning, I arrived early, before the staff, before the noise, before the world. The sun was barely stretching over the rooftops, casting amber streaks across the sidewalk in front of the new center. A pair of sparrows hopped along the concrete as if they too were checking the place out. The community center had been rebuilt, literally, from the inside out. The court had ordered full financial restitution. The shell companies were shut down, the crooked contracts revoked, every siphoned dollar clawed back and returned. Inside, it smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. The walls, now a soft dove gray, were bare for now, waiting for art from the girls who would soon fill this space. I walked through the hall slowly, touching door frames, window ledges, the edges of the bulletin board in the common room, or chine. The first time in years I didn't feel like I had to brace myself before turning a corner. There were no shadows left to dodge. It was mine now, all of it. Not just on paper, but in truth. Celine hadn't apologized. She hadn't looked at me since the ruling. A week ago, she'd held a brief press conference, just long enough to announce her voluntary step back from public leadership to focus on personal reflection. She didn't say my name. She didn't say sorry. She blamed the shifting culture and miscommunication, as if the foundation had simply malfunctioned on its own. People asked if I wanted to go on air, respond. Some even pitched a book deal. I said no to all of it. Let her fill the silence with spin. I was done filling mine with defense. Langston had visited once. Just once. He didn't bring flowers or excuses. He just stood beside me while we watched the staff prep the art tables. He asked gently, "Do you want me to stay?" I took a long breath before answering. "I think I need to see who I am without someone rescuing me," I said, even if that someone meant well. He nodded. He didn't argue. He just placed a hand on my shoulder for a moment, then left. Some things I've learned aren't meant to be rebuilt. They're meant to be remembered. Right. Later that morning, I stopped by the art room. A handful of girls were already there, led by a new volunteer named Ari. She couldn't have been older than 20, her eyes bright behind thick glasses. One of the girls, maybe 8 or 9, sat at the far end of the table, working intently, with red paper in her small hands. When I approached, she glanced up and smiled shyly. Without a word, she held something out to me. It was a paper crane, folded neatly, carefully. The wings a bit lopsided, but proud. I froze. Years ago, I had made one just like it. I had given it to Celine when we were teens, after she'd won her first debate competition. I thought it was a gesture, a quiet token of sisterhood. She'd laughed, crumpled it, said I was always doing weird little things that no one asked for. Now, here was a child offering me the same shape. No sarcasm, no demand, just something beautiful, made with care, and given freely. I took the crane gently from her hand. It was still warm from her fingers. "Thank you," I said, my voice hushed. She beamed. "I make them when I feel calm. Maybe you needed one." I nodded. Maybe I did. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, brushing the sidewalk with gold. I stepped out, the paper crane still in my hand, sunlight on my face, and for once I didn't need to explain anything to anyone. Not to Celine, not to Langston, not to the media or the past, or the pages of sealed affidavits. Because sometimes healing doesn't roar. Sometimes it folds itself into a small red crane and whispers, "You're allowed to begin again." The crane was still warm from the girl's hand. I tucked it close and walked into the sun,